All right, everyone. Well, I guess we can start talking about the lecture and see who else shows up. Um, the first page of this lecture is the hardest part of it, I think. Uh, Conflict with positive versus negative oriented pleasure as the origin of pain. Um, Essentially, the guide in the first page talks about um, the fact that we're conflicted, that we desire pleasure and pain at the same time, but often we don't know it. So when there's a pull in these two directions simultaneously, then pain results from that, from the pull in both directions. Now, this is the little I found this, I kind of puzzled through this. Um, in paragraph 4, when this disturbance is fought against ineffectively, in other words, um, and the personality wants health, it negates that it also wants non-health. Since the striving for non-health is repressed and ignored, the struggle toward health becomes all the more tense. This is the origin of pain. If the personality were conscious of wanting non-health as well as health, the struggle would cease instantly, for the former wish cannot be maintained, only the latter can. So basically, the guide is, I think, talking about a very fundamental pathwork idea, which is that you have to be willing to expose the negative motivations in order to get beyond that, to get through that, and then to uh, stop the pain that comes from not understanding the negative. I really didn't understand how the guide means that it manifests on the physical level. I thought we could discuss that just at some point. Um, the physical system, like all of the systems um, or planes, also strives toward wholeness and health. I guess that makes sense in the sense that there is a natural movement toward physical health that we experience as as people, as physical beings. Um, but there's a disturbing force that pulls in the other direction. This is the desire for the negative. The moment that the struggle between two opposite poles is relinquished and the existence of the negative direction is accepted, pain must cease. I found this to be, I was puzzling about physical pain. I mean, obviously, if you have a toothache, um, I can't see how giving into the toothache stops the pain. I mean, obviously, you have to be conscious of the fact that you have a toothache and feeling the pain. Um, I guess I kind of got hung up on this issue of how physical pain is a manifestation of not being conscious of the negative. I mean, certainly, I guess, if you think about ill health, there are some things that one does that create that. Obviously, if one doesn't exercise at all, if one eats badly, if one doesn't recognize the symptoms of sickness, doesn't do anything about it, then you become sicker and you have more pain. So I suppose on that level, that I can understand that. Um,
Can I say something
Go
about
ahead,
this?
Susan. What do you think?
Um, it's seems to me from my experience in like all my trauma recovery work, and again now from these digestive issues that I've had for um, I don't know 5 or so years now. Um, every once in a while, it will hit me like I I need to have evidence of victimhood. I need it to be physicalized somehow.
Well, that makes sense to me. I mean, my sister does that.
Mhm.
Um, my sister, evidence of victimhood, I think, is a good way to put it. In other words, you feel badly.
Mhm.
And in some sense, that's a shield against other things. Feeling badly somehow is a habit, is
Mhm.
something that you wield against others or against the world.
Well, yeah, in my case, it's like, look what you did to me,
Yeah.
and then it's,
Well, that
it's like takes a lot to let go of it if you don't realize what's happening there. And then with the inability to digest food, it's like, oh, of course. Well, how can I digest all this stuff that goes on in my family? And again, it's just repeating the same pattern in a different way.
yes,
You
that
know.
that makes a lot of sense. Um, I mean, so I guess the first example is about having a toothache. That's different, unless of course you deliberately, um, eat Snickers bars and never brush your teeth, and then you wonder why you got a cavity. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, that is a manifestation on the physical level of an emotional or psychological hang up that manifests physically, right? I
Mhm.
guess we could say that. Yeah. So, and I think that makes sense also in the guide's point that if you become aware and conscious of that desire, that negative desire, then the pain gets less because you know that you're part of it. It's not just happening to you.
Mhm.
So that's pretty straightforward. Um, the guide gives three identical, I think, um, prescriptions about how to deal with this negative positive conflict. On page one, he says, um, when this process is fully understood and the temporary, still unavoidable consequences of the negative wish are accepted, one can let oneself go into this now existing pain and the pain must cease. Do you feel that you resonate with that, Susan? That if you, in other words, and the guide also on the second page says something similar. One accepts the negative without finality and with an objective, non-indulgent attitude. Like you're
Mhm.
saying, hey, I've got this condition, I'm in pain, but it's temporary. And I realize that part of my own emotional, psychological structure is creating this.
Mhm.
And the pain is less. Yeah. Um, and then on the top paragraph, second paragraph of page two, he says, the way out of this conflict between the positive and negative currents is understanding the now. When the struggle is fully understood and accepted as a temporary manifestation, as an effect, accepted as such without finality, and yet with awareness of the rightness of these consequences, the mental or emotional pain ceases. Once you, as he says, next sentence, by understanding the now, in other words, right now you understand the currents that are operating inside you, then the pain ceases or it certainly diminishes. Yeah, as I said before, down at the bottom of page two, one accepts the negative without finality, but with an objective, non-indulgent attitude. So, and then at the bottom of page three, it says, meditate and truly, if you meditate and truly want to find what is in you, Those friends who have not gained this awareness should try their very best to find their negative desires. Meditate and truly want to find what is in you. So I guess that's pretty straightforward about this issue of how the conflict between these two currents, positive and negative, creates pain. So that's pages 1, 2. Page 3 starts talking about how, becoming aware of the negative desires. And how do you do that? Through meditation and reflection. And he doesn't say the daily review, but I think that that's sort of implied, that every day taking stock about the positive and negative leads to that is a meditation essentially. I think the daily review really is pathwork meditation. Don't you think, Tracy? I think
Yes.
it is. Yeah. So then moving on.
Well, it's actually kind of more observation than meditation, but they're sort of similar.
Yes. Yes. So now the guide on page 4 says the familiar thing about, I guess, negative, and what he later defines in lecture 195 as negative intentionality, which is their unwillingness to admit the positive growth, admit the positive into your consciousness. The creativity and the unfoldment you could have. Ask yourself, do I experience everything to the maximum of my potential? What disturbs me possibly more than I admit? There's the issue of the reluctance to embrace the positive. In the middle of that page, at page 4, he really kind of gives another summary of what the goal of the pathwork is and how the pathwork works. And I'll read that. Oh, before that, he talks about how both the negative and positive currents are self-perpetuating. He says, when you come to a certain degree of insight into your psyche, you can see how the positive and negative attitudes are self-perpetuating. Take, for example, any healthy positive attitude. When you are outgoing, constructive, open, inclusive, all things go easily. You do not have to work hard at them. They perpetuate themselves. You do not even have to spend energy on any deliberate kind of meditation. By themselves, your positive thoughts, attitudes, and feelings create more positive thoughts, attitudes, and feelings. These in turn create fulfillment, productiveness, peace, and dynamism. The principle is exactly the same in negative situations. The self-perpetuating forces in this instance can be changed only by this deliberate process which sets something new in motion. Such pathwork process accomplishes this. So what he's basically saying is that examining the self-perpetuating negative forces is the pathwork. That rechannels them into a positive direction. Interestingly enough, at the bottom of this is a very interesting paragraph, bottom of page 4. The personality level that wants the negative and pursues that direction creates a new world or psychic sphere covering the original positive one. Images and forms, the product of attitudes, thoughts, and feelings create this negative world. There are many variations, degrees, and possibilities according to the strength of the negative desires, the awareness of both positive and negative desires, and the balance between the two. So what he's saying really here is that I think it's kind of like the creation of the mask self. In other words, he says it creates a new world or psychic sphere covering the original positive one. So negative, in other words, the negative desire creates images, a new world, he says. In other words, like an illusory world that we choose to inhabit, which covers up a more positive world that's deeper inside us. I think that's like the creation of the mask self.
Mm.
Or living in an illusion, living in a way that's where your images make your wrong conclusions guide your life. So that I thought was very kind of evocative about creating that new world. Oh yeah, and then again on page 5, he talks about the fear of the positive. There is always the main problem, the area in your psyche where the fear of the positive, hence its negation, exists. Consequently, deprivation and suffering manifest in your outer life. You must fully experience this fear within your consciousness so you can transcend it by transforming yourself. Yeah. So he embroiders on this theme about the illusory world that we create on the top of that page. You can and must reach these worlds within your psyche by becoming acutely aware of them. They are a product of your own self-expressions, of your various spheres of consciousness. You must go through them layer by layer within yourself. All right, so that's really the work of the pathwork, is to go through these layers that we've created. The negative current has created. So I think that is, in essence, is the lecture. Now, the last section, the last couple pages, I think are sort of give a sidelight, which I thought this is the easiest thing to understand in a lecture about one's interactions with another person and how one has a decision to make. Are you going to love, acknowledge, and salute the positive in the other person, or are you going to feed off the negative of the other person? Right? Now, this is pretty straightforward. That one has a choice because everyone's a vulnerable human being. We're all the same. In other words, we have our positive and negative aspects. But when you see someone's negative aspects, someone else's, in the context of not judging them, of loving them and accepting them, and saying, I am not going to use these negative aspects to put one over on you, to be prideful, to say, you're this way. Instead, you say, I see these negative aspects. I'm not going to, give in to them or fall into them, but I'm not going to judge you for them. I'm going to help you try to figure out and transcend your own negative aspects. Right? Or you can make the other choice. You can say, I'm going to use the negativity I see in you to play tricks on you, to dominate you, to take advantage of you. Right? That's what the guide is saying in the last couple of pages before the questions. And I found that to be, very straightforward. Because when you're faced with an obligation to relate to another person, how do you do that? Do you relate to them by trying to take advantage of them in some way, using their own faults? Or do you relate to them in honoring them and helping them go transcend their own faults by, I guess, leading with your most positive aspects? So if I were going to explain this lecture to somebody new to the pathwork, I guess I'd start with that. I talk about the interplay between two people and how your intention is the important thing and where you're going to, sorry about that, and how you're going to, what kind of intention you have. Oh, there's Barbara. I guess she got home. So that's it for the lecture in my own recounting of it. And then there's some questions and answers, which we can also talk about. So did people feel this was a difficult lecture? And did you basically agree with my how I presented it, my insights? What do people think about it?
Mhm.
I'm finding your negative desires. I guess the best way to do that is through the daily review. Or of course, mulling over actual interactions that one has. Hey, Barbara. Um, and trying to see how manifestations in your life reflect those negative desires.
So I can add, I can speak a little bit. I think it's it's been very difficult for me to find negative desires. But what I can observe and which has helped me with this whole thing is when I'm doing something negative, to just be aware of the little pleasurable zing that I get. So it's almost like I'm able to observe it from the back end, if you will, not the desire before it's manifested or put into action. But like sometimes if I'm mad at Joel and I'll say something that's not nice, there's a little tiny jolt of pleasure in doing that.
Right, and that kind of that ties into that discussion about how one relates to another person, right? And how
Well,
you
yeah, that like you're right, that part's very easy to understand. But for me, trying to proactively see a negative desire is challenging. I because if I think, well, where do I want something? I can't, but I can feel the little jolt of pleasure in like saying something not nice, for example.
Yeah, for me too. And I think that that afflicts us with those us with a very active idealized self-image. You can't imagine that you actually have a negative desire. I mean,
Well, no, but yeah,
I
but
would not allow.
if you feel the pleasure that you get from being not nice somehow, then you know that the desire was there because it's just two ends of the coin, right? So I was very surprised. I was watching the repeats of some of the speeches at the Democratic National Convention, and
Mhm.
I was shocked to see Biden and Michelle and Barack all said something not nice about Trump, which is unusual, especially for Michelle. She was for like, if they go low, we go high. And I was just watching that and observing that and then wondering whether they if that felt good to them, because it kind of felt good to me in some way, hearing some of the thing, hearing that sort of like them calling him out in a certain way. So I was like, wow, it's very unusual. I don't think I've heard Biden or Michelle or Barack say something overtly negative about him until now. And
Yeah, that's interesting observation. Nancy Pelosi just wrote this book that just came out, and I just happened to open a couple of pages of it, and in it she says that she visits China and tells the leaders off about their oppression of Tibet, the Tibetan people. And then when she meets the Dalai Lama, and she says about those nasty Chinese and what they're doing to your people, and he says, we have to pray that Nancy can deal with her own negative feelings,
right,
you know.
right.
So it's sort of a little bit like that, that Trump's in this sphere of continuously spewing negativity. But if you go down to that level, if you kind of interact on that level, what are you doing?
Exactly. Then you're like playing in the same sandbox. But we all do it. And even if we don't do it, even if you don't ever like, say something negative about somebody in public, just if you hear somebody say something negative and you're sort of like happy about it in a way, that's a form of negative pleasure.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
Barbara.
Well, yeah, I I wonder about that also, but I remember and I might have this a little bit wrong, but in lectures there have been the thought that um, sometimes you need to have negativity to combat like a threat. Um, and so I sort of see it perhaps in that way, in terms of you know, the threat that Trump has. I don't know.
I mean, you've got
Yeah.
to, I keep on remembering this point that, you know, anger is not necessarily negative. Anger,
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
righteous anger, anger can be just a natural response to a situation.
But
Which-
that's not getting negative pleasure though, right?
Mhm.
So I know that, like, you know, Soglio Rinpoche will say there's a time and a place where you have to sort of like stand up to evil.
Mhm.
So, but I'm not sure you get pleasure out of that, actually.
Mhm.
So that's, maybe it's a very fine distinction of, you know, whether you're doing, you know, if you were to see somebody, you know, abusing a child or abusing an animal, and you try to intervene and stop that,
Mhm.
that's standing up to the negativity. But I don't, at least I don't know if you, I've tried to put myself in that position. If I saw something like, you know, beating up a dog or beating up a child, and I said, hey, you know, stop, what are you doing? You know, I don't know if I'd get pleasure out of that, actually.
Mhm.
So I think it's, these things are so subtle, and you have to really feel inside yourself, you know, for the subtle differences between doing, you have to stand up for justice. We should stand up for justice. Turning, you know, seeing somebody beat up on the street of New York and just walking by and saying, oh, well, that's your problem. That's not justice. So if you, to Barbara's point, if you stand up to that,
Mhm.
I don't think you'd feel pleasure from that. I think you'd just know that you were doing the right thing, but I don't know.
Mhm. So one thing, oh, just to continue the other side in the lecture, it talks about how oh, how do I say this? That the negativity is that the positivity is there underneath.
Yeah.
And I tried to think about that in terms of politically Trump also, about like where is his positivity? And I don't know if that's, I guess that's not my job, but I still was like trying to think about that.
Well, that's a tough one
Mhm.
for me, because I think that there are two lectures about evil. There's the three principles of evil, and there's two aspects or three aspects of evil, and the aspects are one is lies and half truths is one of the aspects, and certainly Trump is good at that.
Mhm.
Then another one is domination, dominating
Mhm.
others,
Mhm.
and then the third aspect, um, numbness and lack of control,
Mm.
where you don't feel anything, you've numbed yourself, and so you're capable of evil. Um,
Mhm.
but you know,
Mhm.
there have to be positive qualities. Like, I mean, I've often, the guide also says that, like, if you look at a dictatorial regime like Hitler, let's say,
Mhm.
there, remember, there's only one energy current, right? There's only one, and it can be turned in different ways. So if you have the ability to produce munitions and weaponry, and you have very efficiently functioning factories, that's a positive thing in itself. If you are organized and you can create, um, you know, um, if you're efficient, efficiency and orderliness are positive qualities. You can pervert them into a negative direction, but you know, anything that has validity and staying power, has a positive, inherent positive qualities. As the guide says in those lectures, if evil were only to be evil, it would be a very short duration. If it doesn't
Right.
attach itself to something positive, it can't survive. Kind of like what the guide says in this lecture about that basically there aren't two ways to go in these conflicts between the negative and positive directions. The negative direction, it can't get very far. The positive direction is infinite and keeps opening and multiplying and developing and expanding. So there's a self-limiting quality about negativity or about evil, but if it's allied to positive qualities, it has staying power and strength. So I mean, Trump, even though he eats burgers from Burger King all the time and Diet Cokes, he's pretty vigorous. He's rocking it at 78. He's a lot more vigorous than a lot of 78-year-olds I know. There's positive quality. There's a mind going on there. He's thinking, he's clever, he's sharp, I guess I'm having a hard time finding a lot of positivity, but it's got to be there because without that, the aspects of evil wouldn't be of great duration, of long duration of standing.
Hold on.
Alan, I want to ask a question. I'm listening in on the talk right now. It's very interesting because I do think that something that I've noticed in our current society, I think there's a lot of opaqueness around like good and evil, and I think that the two are often confused. Do you have I heard what you said about the three aspects of evil, but how would you define evil outside of those three aspects? If you were to just give like a succinct definition of what evil is, what would you say?
You mean other than those three aspects?
Yeah, because my opinion is it's not, I don't think that really defines evil. I do agree that those are aspects of it, but I don't think that that's like a definition of it.
Well, I'll give it a try. I mean, I always remember my kind of surprise when, Bill Maher got canceled when he said that the 9/11 hijackers exhibited like a lot of verve and courage, and this was not an easy thing to do, to hijack those planes at the World Trade Center, because everybody was calling them cowardly, right? This cowardly. Now, I can imagine very few things that are as uncowardly as having the guts to commandeer a plane, fake this, have a bomb, and actually fly the damn thing into the towers. So now, in other words, in that there were many aspects of positivity in that act. I mean, the organization it took to plan the whole mission, the cleverness it took to figure out they had these bomb belts that were fake, and that's why the passengers didn't make a move to stop them, except on United 98, or was it 90, 91. And, the planning that went into this. So, in other words, what I'm saying is that many people would say, now that's a very evil act. Bombing the World Trade Center,
Right.
That is evil incarnate. But I say that obviously the intent to take life, the intent to destroy, now that's an aspect of domination, I think. Domination being one of those three aspects, that I'm going to dominate you by taking over. I'm going to bomb you, annihilate you, dominate you. That's evil. But the guide, I think, says that these three aspects always have to go together. Like, there's also the aspect of numbness. Like, what do you have to do in that great movie United 93, if you saw it, about the way that the hijackers took over that flight before yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to add one thing. I would say, though, that a lot of acts of evil is the perpetrators of the evil acts, they don't feel numb. And this ties into your other point that you were discussing previously. They actually derive pleasure from it. So they're not numb, right? They're actually receiving a pleasure from it. And that, to me, is one of the key elements of evil itself, is that it receives pleasure from harming others.
That is right. I completely agree with you. Like I remember that in one lecture, the guide says that there are some people that are only able to experience sexual pleasure in fantasies of cruelty.
That right, exactly. That's a good example of evil, evil energy, if you will.
But I would say that a person who's in that state has numbed himself in some way to get to that.
Yes, it can be. It can certainly be like a serial killer can be numb to the pain of his victims, but also some might argue that he's receiving a pleasure. So
Oh, no, that's
it's a
this
tricky thing.
negative pleasure is a very important concept that we talk about in this lecture. In other words, that there's positive pleasure and negative pleasure. And negative pleasure, I think,
Yeah.
Partly happens when you give in to evil. If evil
Yes,
is in other words, the desire to dominate.
definitely.
Yeah. I mean, the numbness and lack of control is also very key to this understanding of evil. Only when you numb yourself can you commit a lot of the worst acts that people commit.
hmm
Like
hmm
the child soldiers that are drugged
hmm
in the
hmm
Congo, of people like that are kept high or drugged in order to be willing or allowed permit to be prepared to commit these atrocities. Um, yeah. So I mean, I guess the main point is that the positive qualities of evil must be acknowledged. That, in other words, the qualities that made the Nazis so powerful were positive. Their organization,
Well,
stuff like
right. I mean,
weapons,
yeah, like
right?
to your point earlier about the hijackers exhibiting courage. The thing about, and this is where it gets really complicated, but these positive aspects like courage, for example, that the hijackers exhibited, that can be present and they can be committing an evil act at the same time. Like the two are not mutually exclusive. So, and that's because everything in our world is shades of gray. It's very rare where things are just plain black and white. Not to say, I certainly wouldn't illuminate any of the acts that like the Nazis committed or the 9/11 hijackers committed and try to put a positive spin on it. But of course, you can make the argument that they exhibited courage. But just because they exhibited courage doesn't mean they weren't, engaged in an evil act.
Of course. Well, it's really more than that. It's that the courage made the evil worse. It enabled the evil.
Right, right. And that's where it's, evil uses good qualities to carry out its deeds.
Well, it's kind of like
Yeah,
the parasite that attaches to the host, uses the blood and the strength of the host to
right.
you know, yeah,
Exactly.
I would
Exactly.
like to just interject just a couple of sentences because I'm not going to push against anything. I just want to add to it because the word courage comes from the word coere, heart. And this is well known. And so I call it when someone is able to complete their intention, an executive that hurts other people. I don't call it courage. I call it misuse of will.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that because it's not of the heart. We're here to balance the head and the heart with the heart leading the way. And the heart is not emotional. Love is not emotional. It's a power and a force that keeps the whole universe together. And when
Mm-hmm.
we're here to put the head in the service of the heart, that's intuition, and that is God. So as I say, I call it misuse of will. And they're very people like that who create a lot of harm in a very powerful way are in that aspect.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you all. I have to run, guys. It was a pleasure listening in.
thanks a
Hopefully, I can
lot.
listen
Thanks
in the
for
future.
contributing. Thank you.
Thank,
Yeah,
thanks for letting Chet speak.
thank you.
He's been interested in the pathwork for a while now. So,
Well, the pathwork, I mean,
Marion, I just want to say to Marion, that was fabulous observation, Marion. Absolutely right on. And that was just, and you were so succinct in explaining that. It was perfect observation at the perfect moment in the discussion. Thank you, Marion.
Yeah, like the French say, bon courage, right?
Yes.
Yeah, from the heart.
Right. Well, with the word bon coming before courage, to Marion's point, good courage used for some positive purpose, not a negative purpose. That's Marion just described it perfectly. I don't need that anymore.
So I guess that this whole idea of the will, negative intentionality, that also is relevant to the discussion of evil. And then why do people intend negativity? Like, I mean, the lecture says that we create these illusory worlds, sort of unconsciously, right? Mostly. I mean, the images create the kind of prison that we put ourselves in. But that's unconscious. But
Yeah.
the point of the pathwork is to say, hey, what's going on with my life? How did I manifest these negative? What illusions do I believe in? What wrong conclusions have I reached?
Yeah. Anyway, I'd really like to hear from Juan and Joel, because I know last week the last time we didn't get to Juan until the very end, and I was started getting tired. And Juan puts a lot of effort into these lectures. He color codes them. I mean, if you look at his lectures, that's more complicated than what I used to do studying for a law school final. And then I also know, obviously, because I live with Joel, the amount of effort he puts in. So I just really like to hear from Juan and Joel right now.
Me too. Thank you. I will try to
Juan?
make we don't hear the Wheaton.
I want to hear more from Marion.
Yeah, Marion gets the star today. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Juan, if you want.
Wait till I start. Wait till I start
Let's-
singing.
Let's have
Okay, fine.
Marianne.
Okay, Juan, I
yeah.
want to hear from you.
Yeah, well, actually, this lecture again, guys. Thank you again for selecting it. But this lecture is really
Juan,
very.
Juan, could you speak up or get closer or slow down so you're articulate?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, can you hear me? You hear me better now? Or? Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, so I was saying that this is a very very powerful lecture, just like all of them really. But I find that there is so much material in this lecture to pound upon, to reflect upon. I want to start with the first paragraph here and see if I can make a point with my limited words, especially when it comes to this profound material here. And then I go on. Yeah, but what the guy said here in the first paragraph here, and I believe it's the first the first sentence, third sentence. Pain is the result of conflict. It occurs when two opposite directions exist in a personality. The direction of the universal creative force, and this is what I love. Is toward light, life,
Have fun, Chad.
growth, unfoldment, affirmation, beauty, love, inclusion, union, pleasure supreme. Whenever this direction is counteracted by another, and need to mention here by another means, I think just human beings, because I think only human beings have the power to do that. Only us can have that consciousness, that power to really counteract this universal, movement. A disturbance is created. It is not the disturbance itself that creates the pain, but the imbalance and a special sort of tension caused by the opposite direction. This is what causes the suffering. It is very important to understand this, my friend, in order to follow the rest of this lecture. So to me, first and foremost, this is a beautiful, promising, and to me, I find it so encouraging, to see that really the essence of everything in the universe is that beautiful force. And if we were just to get rid of whatever it is that we are using to counteract this beautiful force and just kind of like flow with it, just flow with this beautiful energy, and instead of like fighting against it. So that to me, that's really really is the work and pathwork and everything else to be done. And so the rest is just about undoing all these other branches or negative aspects of our psyche or our personality that is opposing this beautiful current, creative, loving current. Um, so and we all know that, what that is, all these wrong conclusions and, and disalignment and disharmony and fears and self-will and pride and all these other, negative aspects that we know all of us have, to some degree. Um, and But then it comes to the fact that the first step to all this seems to be, in my opinion, to just accepting that negative aspect that is there. Once we accept it, first of course, becoming aware of it. Okay, where and this is the work. Where is it? Like you were reading earlier, Alan. Which aspect of myself? Where am I not aligned with truth when it comes to my personality? Where am I? Where is it in me that I am refusing to see, to acknowledge, to accept? And just work with that. And so once you accept it, and just a matter of connecting that what comes to the surface, that surface material that you're feeling, that you're going to experience or come in contact with by interacting with others, by exchanging, by living every day. And this is where the work review that becomes very handy. And really, once you accept that, instead of resisting, not wanting to accept it because of guilt, because of shame, and then just by accepting it, then just going to work, do whatever it takes to dissolve it. And then not resisting it, because this is the thing. We resist to acknowledge what is, and then we use that which we resist to go against the universal force, right? So I always confused me, and I'm so glad that the guy mentioned this here in the last paragraph, the last sentence actually, or the first page, where he mentioned Jesus actually, when he said, Jesus says, resist not evil. I was confused about that. I was like, wait a minute, what Jesus says? So we just thought, what? We're going to set Satan and all these forces and not resist this evil that is destroying the world? But then, by the way the guide explains it here, is so beautiful, because by resisting, you increase it. You increase it, that evil, right? You increase it, and then by you resisting that evil instead. So it's not that you can align with evil, that you're going to be a part of it, but you are not going to resist it. And in the end, I think it's all about being able to surrender to that divine force, to that divine movement, instead of resisting. Resist not evil, because when you resist it, you increase it. Like I think Mother Teresa that it was asked, one point that, will you march against peace? And would you march against peace? And I think she answered, no, but I will march for peace. In other words, not against it, but for it. You know what I mean? So when we are with something, we are aligning with it. When you are against it, you are basically fighting and increasing and resisting. And I think that's what Jesus says. Jesus tried to say here. But all right. So to conclude, I'm going to try to see here. Then I go to page 5, right? And to me, this is also very important here, because I am all about freedom. When it comes to me, I'm like, freedom, to me is everything, because I feel that when you are free, inwardly and outwardly, you have that autonomy to do what is so important to do, which is that surrender. You cannot surrender to this divine force until you have all these obstacles within, all these problems and all these disturbances and disharmonies, right? So being free and having that autonomy to just surrender. And once you are able to surrender into that divine force, it will carry you. It will carry you. There is not much more to do. And I think that's what the guy said here on the second, on the first paragraph, I think in the middle of it, where he says, where you are relatively free from negative desires, it will be fairly simple and easy to grasp, to feel, to experience the world of truth, meaning what I mentioned earlier, all those beautiful qualities, where all good exists and is self perpetuating, right? Isn't that beautiful?
It is.
Um,
It is.
and
It
then,
really is. Yeah.
yeah, and then lastly, the guy says too in the last paragraph, the one before the last, he says, do not forget that it is impossible to completely want isolation, withdrawal, and separation. Isn't that something? It is impossible. As much as you want the negative, you cannot have that. Unfortunately, this is not enduring. The only thing that is durable, that is strong, that is lasting, is that divine force of love and purity and beauty that that the guy mentioned in the beginning. So wanting the negative is self-defeating, right? Because you can't have it. You can't have it. I mean, you can temporarily get away with it, obviously, in this on this plane, but it's not. It's you can have it. So anyway, it's very very fascinating. So there's so many points that I think that one can make in this lecture, but I just wanted to share that, and I think yeah, it's so much, and all the guys all the points that you guys made. I mean, it's all amazing this bit, but it takes some diving deep into it really to connect to this point. It's not so simple. Like they say, oh, the truth is never on the surface, right? Anyway, guys, so thank you
Thank you, Juan.
for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for your insights.
Yes.
Thank you, Juan. Yeah, I think that's a very important point because a lot of people say anything you resist persists. So there's something that's pretty much physics.
Yeah,
I mean, if you just cut to the chase on that one, that's physics. Anything that you're resisting, you're putting energy into and creating more
right.
momentum for it. So,
More of that, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Joel,
yeah, yeah.
I'd like to hear you speak, Joel.
Joey, go.
You're up on the spot, Joel.
Everybody's
Your turn.
really covered everything very thoroughly.
I know.
So I was just trying to look through and see what I might add. So on page 5, the second paragraph, if I could read, so there is always the main problem, the area in your psyche where the fear of the positive, hence its negation, exists. Consequently, deprivation and suffering manifest in your life. You must fully experience this fear within your consciousness so you can transcend it by transforming yourself. We're talking about fear of the higher self, fear of the full expression of our best qualities, right? And then it goes on to say, you must live through this, not by denying it or struggling away from it, but by seeing it and accepting it, learning to understand its nature. This is what it means going through it. So when I think about how this takes shape in my own life, I have, I have a gift for art to a certain extent, but I see that I don't devote a great deal of. I think I feel like I could devote more time to it. But every time I have a blank piece of paper, it's like I'm starting from scratch. Is it going to be good? And there's an ego part of it there, right? I want to create something I'm proud of, and that I can show off, if you will. I mean, I'm not selling it or having shows or any of that stuff, but just I'll put it on my phone and have the picture and show it to somebody. So just seeing where being honest with myself about the fear, the responsibility that comes from creating something that's of quality, or even in like professional life. I do a little bit of counseling, and I've never really been much in promoting myself, and I tend to be too hard on myself as to my qualifications or my effectiveness, and so that's fear of the higher self, the responsibility that comes with being available. Maybe I'll be afraid that I'm going to be have too many demands and I can't meet the demands. So just really taking response, and some of this will manifest if I'm sick. I'd had COVID for about 5 weeks, And so, one of my favorite prayers is to say, please help me to see what it is I'm supposed to learn from this difficulty. And may I be released from it soon, quickly. Thank you very much. So I put it out there, and I find that helps a lot when I finally say to myself, all right, I'm feeling suffering, I'm feeling pain, whatever it is, lack of health, or emotional pain. I'm afraid, or I'm worried about somebody. They say, let me see what I'm supposed to take away from this difficulty. I find that I usually get an answer pretty quickly, and that's helpful. So, I mean, that's about all I have to say. Overall, I found it to be very helpful. Just this whole idea that we have these conflicting currents, the positive that's pulling us towards our divinity, and then the negative that's has many aspects and takes a lot of work and effort to unwind. A lot of these things go back to early childhood, and probably things that we brought with us. I have a pattern of getting sick, and I realized that was a way of giving myself attention, a way of shutting down, a way of not um, being able to assume responsibility, a way of giving myself a break. Um, but that's took a lifetime to be able to see that about myself and accept it, and not, realize that there's something more to who I am beyond my challenges.
Thank you. It occurs to me that that's such a valuable sentence that you read earlier.
Uh-huh.
When you are relatively free from negative desires, it will be fairly simple and easy to grasp, to feel, to experience the world of truth where all good exists and is self-perpetuating. What you read, Juan. And then, of course, down there in the first line of the next paragraph, as you read, Joel, and then there is always the main problem, the area in your psyche where the fear of the positive, hence its negation, exists. So, the way I'm thinking of it now is that they're like two phases of the pathwork, one where you experience and understand the negative and you acknowledge it, you're prepared to face it. Then the second one, where you're prepared to lift yourself out into the world, into the positive universe, into the positive expression, creativity. And the question is, what is hindering you, me, us, from really expanding as much as we can, fulfilling the potential that we have? Is it negative intent? Is it laziness? There's something that, in other words, it's scary. Look, I keep coming back to the difference between the ego and the real self, I mean, it's scary for the ego to be thrust into creativity.
Yep.
In other words, creativity is scary, I think, for the ego. Is it not? I mean, true creativity, where you kind of let God do its thing. It's not about you. So
Correct.
when it's not about you, the ego doesn't like it. So,
Well, and it's interesting, when I imagine those of us that are artists, or do something creative, whatever it is. Juan cooks that, when the very best is manifest, it is something that's beyond us. We are observing something, some force. I guess it's what Marion's talking about, the love current. The positive, um, just the pure positive energy of creation is being expressed through us, whether it's music or art or speaking or writing, whatever form it is. That we just witness it, right? And we know that it's not us. Yeah, we're there. Our hands maybe use our voice, whatever, our will, our attention, but there's something greater than us, and the ego doesn't really have any need to claim it, because we're just we're witnessing the miraculous nature of creation and of God, just of continuing to manifest.
That's right. That's beautiful, Joel.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
reminds me.
that is true, and it's really in the act of surrender, Joe, that happens, in my opinion. You know, when you are able to, I mean, we look around and we reflect a little bit deeper into everything, every beautiful thing in this world. You acquire it, or you enjoy, or you connect with that joy, supreme, only when you surrender to it, when you just allow yourself to be driven and you know, look at a death, for example. You see a person that is dying until she or he surrenders to that. It's like, okay, and just let it go. That's when they are able to transcend. Look on the sexual act, for example. And I think we're adulty. I think I can say this. You know, the act of orgasms. Like, you know, when you reach that level, you can never have that beautiful experience if you just don't let go and surrender to it, right? I mean, learning, for example, if you don't surrender to a teacher, to my chef, like I have mentor chef, you know, my great guru was Great Kunz, was a Swiss chef, and I had to surrender to this man. Yes, he was a master. He was a creative being that I have ever met in this field of the culinary field, and I had to surrender to him and just, yeah, here I am. Teach me what you know. Tell me what I need to do. You know, you told me to jump out. Only I'm gonna ask how high, and just do what I have to do to really, learn what I need to learn. So, in other words, it's just in that act of surrender that we can connect with that higher being. At whatever level we can do it, and it just, to me, just so obvious. And to me, everything that all the spiritual teachings is all about that, to bring us to that point where we can surrender, let go, and let God. You know, and whatever it takes, whatever needs to be undone, push aside. Resolve, dissolve, whatever, to achieve, to reach that level where we can just let go and allow that inner spirit to just drive us, possess us, and work through us. And that's what Jesus did. I mean, it's the greatest example that I can see is him. It's like, at the last minute when he was about to be crucified, all this pain, he was like sweating blood. Can you imagine? Scientifically now, I think they can prove that only happens when you are so scared, so afraid that you actually start sweating blood. That's how much fear this being, this divine being, was experiencing, the physical plane. Father, this is terrible what is happening to me. I can't, it's death. They're going to torture me. They're going to spit upon me. They're going to do this, that, and the other. They're going to torture me to death. This is terrible. Can you just remove this? I don't want to go through this. But then that surrender, thy will be done. Thy will be done. And you look at what happened. Just because he surrendered to that, he was able to conquer even death. So it's just so amazing to me the way it's crystal clear. It's just all about coming to that point where we can reach that level of surrender. That's just the way I see it. But it's not easy, of course, because like you're saying, Joe, the ego is in between, and there is all these ramifications of the ego that actually control this earthly plane. The ego is in charge here in the material level. We know that. This is all the ego. All these things that we see, touch, and feel, this is all an illusion. This is all an illusive world created by the ego, so that we can transcend to this level of divinity. But yeah, it's a lot of work to do. So thank you.
Thank you. Of course, when Socrates, he surrendered to the authorities by drinking the poison.
Yeah.
He could have left.
Yeah.
It wasn't, if you read the Apology of Socrates or the Crete.
Yeah. I read that book, The Last Days of Socrates. That's a great book. Yeah.
He had every option to flee.
Yes.
But,
His
hey,
friends were telling him
and
to
in
do
those
it.
days, if you were condemned to death and if you just left, they wouldn't
Yeah.
go after you. But he
Right.
said, no, I'm surrendering to the law, to
Yeah.
the greater cause, which is that I'm showing how to
Yeah.
be truly faithful. I will allow myself to die, even though it's unjust, because I'm
Yeah.
surrendering to the greater, ethics or the greater morality that I'm expressing.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's similar to the Christ sacrifice, I think, in some
Yeah.
ways.
It's very similar. It's very similar when you think about that. Jesus was actually God incarnated on earth, right? That that we know, and he had the power. Actually, he actually did have that power to call upon a legion of angels, beings of light, to come and destroy, smashed all these people who were trying to do this evil to him. He had that power. He could have done it, and he moved not a finger against. In the fact, at the end, he just says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing."
Right.
Imagine that. It's like these people are in ignorance. They don't know what they're doing. If they know that by hurting me, they're hurting themselves. So they wouldn't be doing this if they knew better. But yeah, it's a very beautiful comparison with it. Well, Socrates went through because he did have that option, and he had very powerful friends who were telling him to
Yes.
desist from this, and and even willing to pay the fine, whatever they needed to pay.
Yes.
And he refused. And it's like, no, this
Yes.
guy got through this.
Well, so I was thinking also, I was thinking about Teresa. You keep, your struggles at work. Teresa, are you with us? I was thinking
Alan.
that when you surrender, it kind of immunizes you against, for lack of a better word, like the evil at work. Like, for example, if I get involved with an intrigue at work and I am starting to resent certain people and I am starting to think, hey, I didn't get a promotion that I could have gotten, or how can I figure out to my advantage? Then you start getting yourself into a hairy situation. But if you then say, I'm going to surrender to doing the very best job I can, for its own sake, then all of a sudden the conflicts go away. Right, Teresa? I mean, I've experienced that.
Alan, it goes even deeper. I'm reading an amazing book. For anybody who's interested, I'm going to put it here. That actually changed my life and changed the situation at work. It's called Radical Responsibility. An amazing book. It's by somebody who was in the prison for 14 years for drug dealing, and then he became meditation teacher, completely changed his life, and now he's a coach. The book is amazing, and this goes deeper because the surrender is okay. It's very difficult to surrender, but he basically shifts you mentally. He goes in, and I think it goes into the lower self in us, or however Pathwork calls it. He basically has you examine and look at the motives. Why are you perceiving things certain way? And he has you face up to the fact that the way you interpreting facts might be wrong. And I reading this book, I don't know what's the noise there. Somebody's hissing. Reading, I'm sorry, I'm still with COVID too, so it's hard for me to talk and to hear. But reading this book, I realized my interpretation. So there is negative pleasure when those people are taking into being evil, right? So they are doing that. But once I noticed this, and once I noticed that these are the people who like to twist the truth, control, especially control is their big ticket, I started interpreting every single encounter as an act of evil towards me. I give you an example. There is a woman there who, when she first started, she was, friendly with me. I took her out to lunch. She was a new product owner. I tried to really make a friend, right? Because very hostile office, right? So we were friends for a couple of weeks, and chatty and really pleasant and really liking each other, right? And then my boss realized what's happening, and they turned it against me, like in a complete turnaround where they basically made her extremely hostile towards me, right? So she wouldn't say hi to me, she wouldn't talk to me, she would ignore me. And she was sitting 2 desks away from me, and she would be talking on the phone in meetings in a very intimidating, loud tone of voice, to the point that I had to get up my computer, run to the conference room because she would be so obnoxiously loud I could not conduct my meeting or understand anything, right? So anyway, long story short, this has been going on for a while. I was extremely intimidated and upset. And then one day I just went to schedule some meeting with my boss, and I see he's having lunch with that lady. So immediately I interpreted this like, oh, look, so now they're really promoting her. He never took me out to lunch. He's taking out to lunch. Oh, now they have to finish me. For sure, that's my end, because she's already obnoxious. They're already promoting her. And now, what's next? So I'm out of here. That was my interpretation, right? Right after that lunch, we have a meeting about results for the past month of work. And she gets up and she starts chatting with him very friendly. She was always sucking up to him, that's one thing. But, leaving early, and she left. Then I'm in this meeting, and my boss is actually announcing that today was her last day, and she found another job. And I was like, oh my God, look at me. Look at me. I interpreted this like I'm really being finished now because they are having lunch for an hour and a half out of the office. I never do that. Now they're plotting against me. Now, really, this is, serious. And I got extremely upset, and I wore myself thin with that thinking, would turn out to be completely false. So, what this guy is saying in this book, he has you examine your own thinking. He has you make distance to your own thinking. He has to prove to yourself that you're thinking, and because you examine your childhood, it's very much like Pathwork actually, because you go back and recall all these painful things in childhood, which make you look certain way in events in your current life, like
Well,
this.
the images, right?
Yeah, the images, right? So because of these images, I started interpreting everything in the office. Like they hate me, they want to finish me off, and the whole world is conspiring to make me miserable. Today I went into the office. There was nobody in the office. The woman was always there making my life hell. She wasn't there. Nobody else was there. I was there by myself. It was one of the best days at this office. I was extremely productive. And may I add, I was ecstatic. And I said, look, how was that true? Yes, she was hostile. Yes, she was kissing up to him. But she left first. I'm still here having fun. How was any of this true? So I would like to hear more about this negative intentionality, because I think this is where it's at. Where
Well,
we realize it's our interpretation of facts, and it's our perpetuation of certain ways and schemes of thinking, which actually destroys our quality of life. And before she even did that, reading this book, I decided I don't give a shit. They could be pure Satan. They could be the worst motherfuckers from hell. I'm just going to send them love and light, and I'm going to do my shit. Yes, they can fire me.
Mhm.
Yes, and that's about all they can do. They're not going to gang rape me there. They're not going to hit me physically. They're not going to destroy my morale. I am doing it to myself. Yes, they are negative. Yes, they are very controlling. That probably means they have very low self-esteem and other problems, but it was my interpretation of every single fact that contributed to my misery. And once I saw it by reading this book, I started questioning all of my reactions, my negative reactions, saying, is that really true? Like, so they were having lunch, but that was her last day, it turns out.
Yeah.
There were many others
Well,
like
I mean, I
this.
think the answer you came to is the same thing that I suggested earlier. That when you decide to move in the positive direction, it immunizes you against that kind of hostility or backbiting or suspicions or, fear. You don't feel fear when you're identifying with your highest self and surrendering to being the best you can be, the positive direction.
Yeah, but you have to first combat that hostility and need for retaliation and victim attitude. That whole book is about this,
Mhm.
changing you from victim to taking radical responsibility. So once I saw that I'm just being a victim and, oh, poor me, complaining to everybody what the bad bosses I have and how they're really horrible, I was like, wait, whoever the fuck they are here in my life for a reason. They're probably here for me. It is me who's perpetuating
Right.
because I was so deeply hurt with how they were treating me, that I became hostile and defensive and literally aggressive towards them.
Right. And so you realized your part in it, in a sense.
Yeah, and once I
Yeah.
dropped it, I was like, you know what? It's their problem. I still like my job and I'm good at what I do. God bless them. Every single day, whenever I think about them, I just send them love and light, and I do my shit.
Sounds good.
And I'm at peace. Today was just about the best day because she wasn't there. She left on her own, and I'm still there. And I was like, look at this. So it's, I think that the whole idea is that negative creation, like what he's saying, has to be examined, has to be really looked at, saying, why am I reacting like this? You know, what is, because these are our triggers. These are our triggers that we have to take responsibility for, calm ourselves down, and start thinking like a responsible adult instead of triggered child who's perpetuating that, you know, cycle of viciousness. And he also talks about this victim, persecutor, rescuer triangle, which I never heard about. Is absolutely genius, but that's how most of this toxicity plays out. You know, one person is the prosecutor, so the other one is a victim. Somebody's trying to come and be the rescuer, and that triangle in different roles just keeps shifting, and it's, you just gotta stop and get out of it. You know, get out of it. I was like, let them play with themselves. I'm in that game. See ya, one way or the other. And mentally, I left it. And since, so much better. You know, so much better. So I don't know about surrender, but radical responsibility and avoiding victimhood and really examining your conclusions. My conclusions were making me absolutely miserable. My own conclusions. It had very little to do with the actual facts.
Right, that's a
I-
good sign.
I think one very important point, Teresa, is there. That is one great aspect of it. Also, I think Alan mentioned, the image, and I think that's one very important aspect of that experience that you had there. Because I think that's, in my opinion, that's how the images goes. You must have in the past, perhaps, experience, that you had the experience similar to this one, where people gathered and they were planning, and you made that conclusion that whenever this happened, this was going to be your end, and this was going to be against you. And I think one very important thing to observe there is that this person that behaved like this, that was not the adult Teresa. That was a little recalcitrant Teresa that that is still living in you, that still had that fear, then that makes those conclusions like this. Like when like the guy I think mentioned in one of the lecture, if you are bathed with hot water one time, and you conclude that every time you bathe now, you're gonna experience gonna get burned from this hot water. So I think that's an example of how we create those images there, like how you went about torturing yourself, and and thinking that they were planning, that they were gathering together because they were going to finish you, and you make that conclusion that was your end. But it's good to observe, I think, that wasn't really the mature Teresa, the adult Teresa that you are now.
I agree. This definitely is the trigger.
Yeah, that little Teresa that is still there, immaturely making those conclusions in you.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And when I do work with Pathwork helper, and she always brings up my little girl who was deeply traumatized, and for sure it's coming from that trauma. But that book basically turned me around, because that book was basically telling me, you're not the victim. Whatever the situation is, you need to realize what's going on and remove yourself from it one way or the other. Distance yourself to it, calm yourself down, remove yourself from playing that victim, persecutor, and defender and rescuer, because we all have it in us, and that's an extremely toxic triangle. So I highly recommend this book. It's like a compliment to Pathwork, but he's actually incredible in explaining and giving tools to examine all of these aspects. Why are we getting inside our head like this? Why are we doing this? How are we perpetuating this? How are we? And that's what I was doing. They hurt me. I was perpetuating this, like, oh, you're going to treat me like this, so I'm going to treat you like that.
Exactly.
Those are Pathwork insights. Well, thank you.
Yeah. The negative is perpetuating the negative there, somehow.
I am very curious about that negative creation. If anybody can say more about that pleasure of that negative creation,
That's something we often touch on.
Yeah, I
It's
can discuss it. I can discuss it with you further, Teresa, when we meet if you want.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
but maybe somebody here can also. I know I was late. I thought it was at 7 at some point, so I missed out a lot.
yeah, let me just see if Beverly has something she'd like to say. And Susan, you haven't said too much. Beverly, what's on your mind, and what do you think of the lecture and our discussion?
Well, the one sentence that jumped out at me was, I don't know who said it, but somebody said that when it's not about you, the ego doesn't like it. I thought that was a really funny, very poignant sentence that I have to think about more.
I made that comment in relationship to creativity and art, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking about you, that that there's a fear of the positive, right? When one is in creative process, it's exhilarating, but it's also, I think, fearful for the ego. Is that so? Do you think that's true?
Fear of creativity?
Yeah. I mean, like if you're an artist, you feel you want to move forward in the positive direction, but it's also threatening to the ego. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. That's just something to think more about. Like, what are the ramifications of that?
Well, what do the artists here think?
Um, I've been reading a book recently by Elizabeth Gilbert called Big Magic, and her idea about I really relate to that creativity, and it's almost like these ideas are entities in themselves, and that they are, they're looking for somebody to manifest them, and they like visit you, but you might not be ready for it, or and it's sort of like what she calls like inspiration, when you feel that feeling of your heart quickening, or like, yes, I can do this, or I got it. And but that also you can lose it, that something happens, or you get distracted and you don't follow through with it, and it's almost like it leaves you and it goes to somebody else. And it's not only art, but it's also scientific discoveries, ideas, that, and it's kind of like that idea that it's almost like there's a hot idea that it gets thought of by several people at the same time, that it's just these, kind of entities. So I don't know. For myself, I think I've talked about how the pathwork was so helpful to me in terms of finding my path in terms of creativity, in just taking things inside, and just feeling like a visceral feeling towards whatever I was, going about, and also allowing um, the dark hole, the black hole, that there's nothing there, that it's, and just being able to allow that, because in a way that makes it available to have these other, the creativity come to you when it does. So that's just my latest on creativity. So, and by the way, I have a show coming up. I'm going to be part of a big. I sent out a news blast to a couple people.
I got it.
think, yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
I think I sent it to you, Joel. And oh, of course, Marion. I'm part of like a really giant group show that's going to be at the Westbeth Gallery. Lots of things to look at. So that's coming up next Wednesday. As it opens, but it'll be up for about 2 or 3 weeks. So.
Thank you. Susan, did you want to say anything else? Marion, you wanted to comment?
Susan, go ahead. I think you started, Susan. Yes.
Oh. Okay, I can just first about the creativity, I definitely was thinking a lot about that in reading this, about how I find ways to keep myself really busy and don't have time to work with my creative pursuits. And it also connects back to what I was talking about before with the trauma. Like that, there's always someone to blame for my whatever my negative thinking is. and and to what Teresa was asking about, I and back to what I was saying before about the evidence of victimhood, and like that's important because I can see now that I would ultimately get pleasure out of, after I make these displays, I get people to agree with me, and people to say, see, yeah, oh my God, how can you stand that? How can you deal with that? And you know, it's like with the Trump thing too. Like I work really hard on not joining in on attacking him, whether it's, you know, I don't do it aloud, but I do it in my head all the time. And instead going to the place of, well, number one, recognizing that what I see in somebody else that's really upsetting me is something about me, and also praying for them and for myself to move to the positive place. So,
Thank you. All right. Yeah.
I would like to just share something. Me. And it's a sharing, it's not a teaching. It's because this lecture so speaks to me because, as I always use that phrase that other people have too, all my unfoldment is on a spiral. It's the same stuff I've had forever, and the spiral has just expanded a great deal. So I'm very grateful for what I know about my dominant personality type of head, heart, creator, and then my defense of reason, will, and emotion. I'm very grateful for that because that I go in and out of that throughout my day. And so when I do have some sort of conflict with someone, usually because I'm more the emotion type, defense, and in my higher self, my dominant quality is open-heartedness, I attract the strong-willed type and the type that wants to dominate me. And so I've had to learn through a lot of relationships do that. So I've really, really come a long way to live my authentic life. And so I'm very, very grateful for that in the Pathwork and about the personality work. And so the other is that I've learned the conceptual, that the grounding is the conceptual, not the intellectual, but the conceptual, that every lower self quality has a divine aspect. And we have a lecture on that, look for the divine aspect. So, and also what I've learned is that my best friend who will never let me down is within me. There's not anybody, any other friend that will never, ever, ever let me down. Although I'm going to have letdowns, but the one. And then what the guide says, the first step of transformation is observation, not trying to be different, not trying to change. So what I've learned is, and I've come to accept, everything brings me closer to my God self within. my best friend within, everything. So after many, many decades of work, I've much more accepting of my lower self. And so I'm in New York City and you encounter everything here. And so sometimes walking down the sidewalk, there's people all on their phones walking every which way and they aren't watching where they're walking. And so I love calling all of them idiots. And it's one of my favorite words. And you idiot, watch where you're going. So it's one of my very favorite words. And so I always report into my higher self. Oh, I'm doing that again. And I've learned when I think they're idiots, they're walking with their phones in front of their face, that I'm giving my power over to them. And that's why I'm having a negative reaction. And I can catch it. Oh, it happens in a flash. I'm giving them the power. And so then when I, call them all idiots, I feel more powerful. So I'm trying to find a gateway for my power. And a way that I handle that a lot is I report into my God self, because it's what the guide brings us to, those three spheres, the 100-100, the 50-50, and the unitive state. Well, when I'm in that, they've got the power and I don't, I'm the victim, and because of what they're doing, then it's what this divine Mother Mira, who's this wonderful spiritual teacher many years ago, said, when you're in the world of duality, you better have a God outside yourself. So I know when I'm in that reactive state, I have to talk to my God and say, oh, I'm doing it again. Just report in, not judging myself. And it really, really lightens the load when I say, oh, I'm doing that thing again. Or if I go down to my Whole Foods market, and sometimes people there's some food there, something that's it's safe, it's not tainted or anything, like a little chocolate covered nut, and nobody cares if I pick up that chocolate covered nut and eat it, but I feel like I got to steal it so nobody notices I'm doing it. And as a child, I had to steal it because my mom would hide all the cookies away and I had to steal it. So I still have that quality of getting a kick out of stealing a piece of food. But I just tell my higher self, my God self, oh, I'm doing that again. I'm doing that again. And then it seems to dissipate. It seems to dissipate. So one of the things I've enjoyed doing is I separate out my human Marion, who's never going to be perfect, and my divine self that is totally perfect. And so I do a little back and forth. If I'm divine over here, or I'm over here, I'm in my divine self is saying, oh, we're going to try out some new things and expand into the universe. And we're going to go to some new places. And my human Marion says, no way, Jose. Excuse me. No way, Jose. I am not going there. I'm not expanding. I won't go with you. And you can't make me, because I'm scared. I'd rather stay with my pain. It's what's in this lecture. The pain is familiar. I'd rather stay with that. I'm not going there. And then my higher self becomes empathic toward her. There's no criticizer, and listens to her and says, oh, I hear you. Is there and let me hold your hand because we're together. And is there something we could do that is a little bit different and new, where you will feel safe? And then I have to listen to her, because it's through the gateway of her belligerence and stubbornness and all that, I'm going to find a real need of mine. Because she'll say something like, oh, there's that new coffee shop that has those coconut milk lattes. Could we go have one of those? And then I think, yes, we can do that today. And then I realize, hey, I'm so caught up with all the stuff I have to do in my life, all my responsibilities. Through listening to her and her belligerence, I got in touch with a real need to go sit and have maybe a latte and relax and just be with God and be in myself. So I just want to do that sharing, because I'm at that stage in my life where that's what helps me, because I don't have any new issues. I got the same old stuff.
Thank you. Thank you for the beautiful
Right.
story.
Thank you, Marion. That was a perfect example of what I call Miriam's Axiom 101, which is the beginning of change is observation. You have little sayings, and that's my Miriam 101. The beginning of transformation is observation. And that was a perfect example of how you are observing, that aspect of yourself, which is then therefore transforming it. And this goes back to one of the first lines I read in the Pathwork many, 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 many years ago now, which I couldn't believe, which is the following: the mere observation of one's distortions, images, will cause them to pixelate. That's another Merriam word, pixelation. And I thought, well, this can't be true because I came from a world where you had to do something. But by goodness, it is true. The mere observation of one's distortions will cause them to pixelate.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
So
well,
thank you,
report
Mary,
in.
for
We-
giving
And to
that great
report
example.
into God. Because if
Yes.
I'm identified with suffering, I distinguish suffering from pain. Suffering is when I'm totally identified with only being a human being. That is total suffering.
Exactly.
And when
That's the
when I can report in, I am then now I can report to my God self then and say what I'm doing. Then I have that connection.
exactly. That's
Yeah.
the beauty of the daily review. You see, you're
Yeah.
reporting in.
Yes.
That's why. And as soon as you're making your daily review, you are de facto in your observer self.
Yes. And that is spirit. The observer is spirit. That's who it is. Yeah.
Exactly. And then yes, and then the thing I've noticed that I'm in the observer self as opposed to the ego self, I'm connected to the mothership because I'm standing in truth, even if I'm observing something negative, and God knows I have plenty of negative things to observe, but I am still standing in the truth at that moment. And when I am standing in the truth, it's like, beam me up, Scotty. I'm connected. And that when you're connected, then the positive energy, the God energy can flow through you, the creative energy. It's all the same. It's that the creative energy, the God energy, it's all the high frequency energy. So that's the beauty of the observer self. It's not, you're not judging anything. You're just observing, reporting in, as you would say, the daily review. That's I could never believe, coming from a world that I came from, it's like the idea that you didn't have to actually do something was, it took me many, many years to believe that, but now I do believe that.
That is very interesting. And as, of course, as we know in physics, the observer collapses the wave function.
Yes, it does.
That's the
Well, say it again, Alan. What did you say?
Well, it's the famous quantum physics thing about that the observer alters the reality.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. Well,
Just
you
the
observe.
observation of something changes the reality of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The light waves, that to me, that's just so amazing that the actual something that I would consider to be an external fact, if you will, which is the light, the way light moves, is changed by the observer. But anybody that has children or grandchildren can see that, because the way, my grandchildren in particular, they behave very differently around me than they do around their parents, because I have a different observation of them. Because I have the luxury of not having to be the parent, and they behave very, very, very differently based on the observation of me versus, so, but it's just amazing to think that light itself, because but that experiment, which you can Google and read about, it just is like, I've never been able to really get my mind around it. I accept it as true, but it's just like, how is that possible? But then you take it down to the basic point that everything is got consciousness. I mean, we know from, the wonderful work that Emoto did. He spent his entire life observing water crystals, that we know that water crystals have consciousness and they respond quite drastically to external stimuli. So light is just sort of one step maybe less differentiated than water molecules, but they're pretty undifferentiated. aspects of consciousness, water molecules, light molecules, but they're respond, and we all know that about plants. We did that. Every one of us did that in biology class, right? You sing to the plants, you say nice things to the plants. And then, I mean, I'll never forget doing that when I was in ninth grade biology class, and half a century ago in Virginia. And it was like, whoa, how is this possible? But obviously, a plant is a very sentient being. But water, I mean, that, The Hidden Messages of Water by Emoto. I mean,
Yes,
I've mentioned it many times.
Yes, I speak into my water glass every day. Gratitude and love, gratitude and love.
But also our bodies are like a great percentage of water. So
huge percent.
Yeah.
Huge
So even our bodies respond.
Of course, even the earth.
Mhm.
I was reading something today about there's fungus created all around the earth right now, which is having some curative. I haven't got my mind around it, but it's absorbing some of the toxins. So the earth itself, of course, the earth is alive. It's a sentient being. Everything is alive. Everything is God consciousness, and therefore it's going to respond to the different energy currents. And Marianne's beautiful, entry, conversation tonight about like love being the highest. And yes, I mean, that's, love is, what does that say? Love can change, love does that. I mean, love changes everything. But we find it difficult to stay connected to it, as much as we would like. And, again, just, okay.
And
thank you.
As I said, I'm on the spiral of the same issues. And it's a lot about, I remember my therapist, this decades and decades ago, he was so wonderful speaking, because I'm the youngest of 4 children in my family. And he used to refer to the things I would go through, the loneliness of the youngest child. And so there was nobody below me, I was the youngest. So I was always home. Everybody else was going to school while I was still home with, mother who didn't pay much attention to me. So I am now at this time of my life, my elder life, I'm going through a lot of loneliness. So I'm not saying this for anybody to fix me up. I'm saying I'm going through this again. When I'm out on the street, I see my neighbors. I'm in Central Park. I'm with the squirrels. I'm with the sky. I am very happy. Then I enter into my apartment, maybe in the evening, it's time to come home. And that loneliness pervades. And so I've learned not to try harder, but to get more support, allow more support for me, because that's what was missing in my life. Those early childhood needs, I need to look at them again, because I need now, and I don't know always what, but that then can be my prayer. What do I need to support my knowing that I'm not alone? I know it's God within, but I'm at a new page on the spiral. A quick fix doesn't work anymore. I've got to go through a process now at this age about the same issues of alone and lonely.
That's interesting. Al, you want to do a meditation? We're
Yes,
getting
let's do
towards the end.
meditation, my friends. That would be the thing to do. Where you are relatively free from negative desires, it will be fairly simple and easy to grasp, to feel, to experience the world of truth, where all good exists and is self-perpetuating. Therefore, there is no need for struggle, for doubt, for fear, or for deprivation.